A duchess may open her doors to the desperate, Duke Alexander Thornmere said. She may not close the law outside them. The public customs inquiry was packed with merchants, sailors, widows, and reporters. 3 prisoners stood under guard beside Duchess Rosamund Thornmere. Their clothes were salt-stained, their faces bruised from confinement. Behind them, officers displayed crates allegedly discovered inside St. Anne's Mariners' Refuge. Sir Lucian Vane addressed the room with grave satisfaction. Foreign spirits, untaxed tobacco, and stolen silk, all concealed beneath her Grace's roof. Alexander looked at his wife. "Did you know those goods were there?" "No. You admit hiding the prisoners." "I hid witnesses from the man controlling every cell, confession and evidence ledger in Thornmere." Lucian lifted the lid of another crate. "Her Grace's distinction between witness and criminal appears remarkably convenient." Then his officers brought forward one final chest. The black wood bore the Thornmere ducal seal. Rosamund's expression changed. "Open that one." Lucian placed a hand upon the lid. "It contains contraband. It contains the reason you searched my refuge." Lady Honoria Bell, the royal inspector observing the inquiry, stepped forward. "Break the seal." Inside lay medicine, sacks of flour, and folded winter blankets. Beneath them was a list of coastal families awaiting relief and a transport order signed by Alexander himself. Rosamund looked directly at her husband. "This cargo vanished 3 weeks before it supposedly appeared beneath my roof." A harbor worker turned the crate over. Burned into its base was the storage mark of Lucian's private underground vault. 6 years earlier, Alexander and Rosamund had believed reform would bring them closer. Thornmere's coastline had lived for generations between law and necessity. Fishing villages survived poor seasons by carrying untaxed goods. Customs officers accepted bribes. Wealthy shipowners paid to avoid inspection, while small captains lost entire cargoes over minor errors. Alexander inherited a system in which corruption had become so ordinary that people called it tradition. He meant to end it. "No family name will purchase innocence," he declared during his first Harbor Council. "And no poor man will be condemned because he cannot purchase influence." Rosamund supported him. She had already established St. Anne's Mariners' Refuge after a winter storm killed 23 sailors. The refuge offered food, beds, legal assistance, and work for injured dockmen and widows. It also kept copies of ship manifests, so families were not helpless when officials claimed records had disappeared. In those first years, Alexander and Rosamund worked as partners. She brought him evidence. He ordered investigations. She found witnesses willing to speak. He protected them through the courts. Alexander once told the Harbor Board, "Rosamund reminds me that order exists to protect people, not merely to organize them." At the time, he meant every word. Sir Lucian Vane had served Alexander's father. He knew every officer, warehouse, and smuggling route along the coast. Where Alexander saw an inherited disgrace, Lucian offered a disciplined solution. He proposed the Thornmere Coastal Authority, a central body controlling inspections, arrests, seized property, and preliminary hearings. "Fragmented authority created corruption," Lucian said. "One command will end it." Alexander granted him broad power. At first, the results appeared remarkable. Smuggling arrests increased. Dock fees stabilized. Wealthy merchants who had once ignored the law paid fines. Newspapers praised Thornmere's transformation. Investors returned. Alexander believed he had finally placed law above private influence. Rosamund noticed what the reports omitted. The first troubling case involved a fishing vessel owned by Eliza Broom. Her boat carried salt, fish, and winter coal. Its manifest had been prepared before entering Thornmere Harbour. Customs officers seized the vessel anyway, claiming tobacco had been hidden beneath the cargo. Eliza's son was arrested. The original manifest disappeared. Within 10 days, the boat was sold at auction. No hearing? Rosamund asked Lucian. The confession made one unnecessary. May I see it? It is held in customs custody. Did he have legal counsel? He declined it. Eliza's son later told a Refuge lawyer that officers had placed a paper before him and threatened to arrest his mother if he refused to sign. The confession had not been read aloud. Alexander questioned Lucian. The customs chief produced a complete file. Signed confession. Contraband record. Witness statement. Sale authorization. Everything appeared proper. Alexander looked at Rosamund. The evidence supports the seizure. The evidence is controlled by the same office accused of altering it. You asked me to investigate. I did. You asked Lucian to investigate himself. The answer irritated him more than it should have. More families came to St. Anne's. A grain vessel was detained because one page of its manifest was allegedly missing. A medicine shipment intended for fever-stricken villages vanished after being marked for inspection. A coal barge was auctioned before its owner received notice of charges. Every incident followed the same pattern. The valuable cargo disappeared. The captain confessed. The ship was sold. The family received nothing. Rosamund began comparing the Refuge's copies against customs files. Arrival times had been changed. Cargo descriptions differed. Some seizure orders were dated hours before the vessels entered harbour. When she requested access to the customs warehouse, Lucian refused. Legal records cannot be opened to charitable institutions. The Refuge is providing counsel to the accused. The Refuge is encouraging them to resist lawful authority. Rosamund went to Alexander. He was reviewing the latest coastal reports. You granted Lucian the power to seize cargo, imprison sailors, control the evidence, and sell the ships. He required sufficient authority to dismantle organized smuggling. There is no independent witness at any stage. The Harbour Board audits the accounts, using figures his office provides. Alexander set down the report. Every time the authority secures a conviction, St. Anne's produces a family claiming injustice, because the families have nowhere else to go, or because they believe you will overturn any law that causes them hardship. Rosamund stared at him. Is that what you believe? He did not answer directly. Lucian already had. The customs chief had begun speaking privately to Alexander about the influence of the Refuge. The harbour no longer asks what is lawful, Lucian said. It asks whether the Duchess approves. Rosamund does not oppose the law. She opposes every consequence visible from her windows. She has delivered guilty men to the court herself. In the past. Alexander frowned. Lucian continued carefully. Mercy can become a rival authority without intending to. The phrase remained with Alexander. He had noticed that sailors trusted Rosamund. Widows brought petitions to her. Dock workers waited outside the Refuge rather than the customs office. He told himself the discomfort came from administrative disorder. He did not admit that it also felt personal. The winter relief shipment arrived during the coldest week of the year. Alexander had ordered medicine, flour, coal vouchers and blankets for 7 coastal settlements. The cargo bore his seal. It was logged entering Thornmere harbour shortly after dawn. By evening, the ship had been detained. Lucian's office claimed part of the manifest was invalid. The next morning, the cargo disappeared. Customs records stated that it had been transferred to secure storage. No storage location was listed. Families waited for supplies that never arrived. Rosamund confronted Lucian in front of the Harbour Council. "Where is the relief cargo?" "Under investigation." "For what?" "Possible concealment of untaxed goods. Inside blankets and fever medicine. Smugglers rely upon respectable cargo. Then inspect it and release what is lawful. Customs procedure will determine the timing. 3 children died of fever in the southern settlement before the medicine arrived from another source. The original shipment was never recovered. Alexander demanded an explanation. Lucian produced reports claiming the cargo had been stolen during an attempted transfer. 2 guards were blamed. 1 disappeared. The other was found drowned. The case was closed. Rosamund did not believe it. Alexander wanted to believe he had been given every fact. Caleb Rook reached St. Anne's after midnight with blood on his coat. He had served as a harbour pilot for 17 years. 2 younger sailors supported him through the Refuge's side entrance. All 3 had escaped from customs custody. Rosamund ordered the chapel doors locked. "You understand what happens if I hide you?" Caleb placed a torn ledger page on the altar. "You understand what happens if you do not." The page listed seized ships, cargo values, and underground storage codes. Beside, several entries were private sale prices. One line referred to Alexander's relief shipment, transferred below Customs Court, reserved for winter market release. Rosamund read it twice. "What is below the court?" "A vault, connected to the old salt tunnels." "Who controls it?" "Lucian." Caleb described how legitimate ships were redirected to an isolated quay. Officers removed their original manifests. Valuable goods went underground. Cheaper cargo was displayed as evidence. Confessions were forced. Ships were sold through companies linked to customs officials. "The prisoners know," Caleb said. "That is why men disappear before trial." Rosamund sent a message to an independent barrister outside Thornmere. Then she hid the 3 sailors in the abandoned chapel wing. She did not tell Alexander. That decision preserved the witnesses. It also gave Lucian exactly the accusation he needed. Alexander came to the Refuge the following afternoon. Lucian accompanied him. 3 fugitives escaped from lawful custody, Alexander said. "Were they brought here?" Rosamund stood between him and the chapel corridor. "They came seeking protection." "Where are they?" "I will surrender them to an independent court." "There is no independent Thornmere outside the authority of its duke." "That is precisely the danger." His face hardened. "You admit defying my order." "I admit refusing to deliver witnesses to the officer they accuse." Lucian spoke softly. "Your Grace, this is no longer charity, it is obstruction." Rosamund turned towards him. "You have already written the word you want in the report. Why pretend this conversation matters?" Alexander stepped between them. "You will provide the prisoners and every document they carried." "No." The refusal landed harder than any accusation. "You place your judgment above the law. I place evidence beyond the reach of the man altering it. You expect me to believe fugitives over the officer who restored order to this coast. I expect you to examine what each of them gains by lying." Alexander suspended the Refuge's legal privileges before leaving. Rosamund watched his carriage depart. She had never seen him look at St. Anne's as though it were enemy territory. Lucian moved quickly. Newspapers reported that the Duchess was sheltering smugglers. Customs officers claimed unidentified crates entered the refuge after dark. Several donors withdrew support. Alexander was urged to request emergency powers, allowing immediate seizure of property connected to suspected smuggling. Lucian called it the Emergency Harbor Charter. It would allow customs to arrest without warrants, sell detained ships before trial, and close St. Anne's permanently. Rosamund understood the purpose. If the refuge disappeared, so would every independent copy of disputed manifests. She copied the sailors' documents and sent them to 3 separate solicitors. Then Lucian planted the evidence. During the night, officers moved crates of spirits, tobacco and silk into an unused store beneath the refuge kitchens. Among them was Alexander's stolen relief chest. A dock worker forced to help marked its underside with the symbol used for Lucian's underground vault. He hoped someone would notice. Alexander ordered the search to be public. He believed witnesses, reporters, and Lady Honoria's presence would prove that the investigation was transparent. Lucian encouraged the decision. The courtyard of St. Anne's filled before noon. Customs officers emerged, carrying contraband crates. Each discovery drew louder reactions. Rosamund stood beside the 3 sailors, who had finally stepped forward under Lady Honoria's protection. Alexander looked at the goods. His disappointment was colder than anger. A duchess may open her doors to the desperate. She may not close the law outside them. Lucian addressed the crowd. Foreign spirits, untaxed tobacco, and stolen cloth all recovered beneath her grace's roof. Alexander turned to Rosamund. Did you know these goods were there? No. You hid the prisoners. Yes. You denied my officers entry. I denied Lucian private access to the witnesses accusing him. Lucian gestured towards the crates. And now evidence appears wherever her grace refuses lawful inspection. Then officers brought forward the chest bearing Alexander's seal. Rosamund recognized it immediately. The winter relief order had used black timber, iron corners, and a double crest. Open that one. Lucian placed his hand upon it. It contains contraband. It contains the reason you searched my refuge. Lady Honoria approached. Break the seal. The lid opened. Medicine bottles gleamed beneath folded blankets. Sacks of flour filled the lower half. Alexander reached inside and removed the list of intended recipients. His own signature appeared beneath the relief authorization. This is the missing shipment. Rosamund's voice remained steady. It vanished 3 weeks before Lucian claims it was found here. A harbor worker stepped from the crowd. He turned the crate over. Burned into the base was the coded mark of the underground customs vault. Caleb Rook raised his bound hands. I carried that chest beneath the customs court. It was never inside the refuge until Sir Lucian needed it to be. Lady Honoria looked towards the customs chief. Lucian took 1 step back. Seal the customs court, she ordered. Place every officer under guard. Then she turned to Alexander. Your Grace, we are opening whatever lies beneath it. The customs court was sealed before sunset. Lady Honoria placed guards at every entrance, including the river gate beneath the eastern quay. Lucian's officers surrendered their keys, ledgers, and weapons. Lucian himself remained in the inquiry hall under watch. He continued to insist that the mark beneath the relief chest had been copied. Any dock worker could burn that symbol into timber, he said. Caleb Rook stood beside Rosamund. Then any dock worker should be able to tell us where the tunnel begins. Lucian looked at him with controlled contempt. You escaped lawful custody, because men who entered your cells did not always reach trial. Alexander turned towards Caleb. What do you mean? Caleb's expression remained steady. 3 captains disappeared after refusing to sign confessions. Customs reported them transferred. No receiving prison recorded their arrival. Lucian intervened. Smugglers frequently give false names, then explain the blood beneath the western cells, Caleb said. Alexander looked at Lady Honoria. She did not wait for his permission. Open the lower level. The entrance to the underground vault lay behind a wall of account shelves. A mechanism, hidden beneath Lucian's desk, released a narrow iron door. Beyond it, stone steps descended into darkness. The air smelled of salt, tar, and damp wood. Alexander entered first with Lady Honoria, Rosamund, Caleb, and 6 guards. Lucian was brought behind them in chains. The passage opened into a vaulted chamber running beneath the customs court. Crates stood in rows from floor to ceiling. Each bore marks from ships officially recorded as empty, destroyed, or lawfully auctioned. There was flour from Alexander's relief shipment, medicine intended for fever settlements, coal vouchers, foreign silk, barrels of spirits, copper tools, navigation instruments, even household goods taken from the cabins of seized vessels. Rosamund moved slowly between the stacks. These are not the possessions of smugglers. Caleb lifted a child's wooden chest from one shelf. It came from the Mary Alice. The captain's wife was told everything had been lost in the fire. Alexander looked towards Lucian. There was no fire, Lucian answered without shame. The vessel was unsuitable for continued service. That was not my question. No, there was no fire. The second chamber contained documents. Original manifests were tied in bundles. Confessions lay unsigned beside completed versions carrying forged marks. Auction notices had been written days before certain ships arrived in Thornmere. Lists ranked incoming vessels by cargo value and by the influence of their owners. One column carried the words, "Low risk of challenge." Most of the names belonged to fishermen, widows, small merchants, and independent captains. Rosamund found Eliza Broom's original manifest. It listed fish and coal, no tobacco. The accusation against her son had been manufactured after the vessel was seized. Alexander read the seizure order. It is dated the morning before the ship entered harbor. Caleb pointed towards another file. They knew which vessels they wanted before inspection. Lady Honoria opened a sales ledger. The seized ships had been purchased by companies sharing the same solicitor, banker, and forwarding agent. All 3 were linked to Lucian. The goods were sold through warehouses outside Thornmere, then brought back during winter shortages at inflated prices. The stolen relief cargo had been reserved for that purpose. Lucian had taken medicine from villages, expecting it freely, then prepared to sell it back after disease spread. Alexander's voice was almost unrecognizable. Children died. Lucian did not look away. Winter kills children. You withheld their medicine. I protected a profitable supply. Rosamund stared at him and called it law. At the far end of the vault, guards found the missing prisoner's records. Several files were marked as transfers. None contained receiving signatures. A locked room beyond the records chamber held restraints, blood-stained clothing, and personal effects belonging to sailors officially listed as escaped. One coat was identified by Caleb. It belonged to Captain Moss. What happened to him? Alexander asked. Caleb looked at Lucian. He refused to sign. Lucian remained silent. Lady Honoria ordered the harbor searched for the missing men's bodies. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. He had believed the growing number of convictions proved the coast was becoming lawful. Now, each figure represented a person selected because no one powerful was expected to defend them, except Rosamund had. That was why Lucian needed St. Anne's destroyed. The public inquiry resumed the following morning. This time, the crates displayed before the hall came from beneath the customs court. Original manifests were matched against altered copies. Families identified property taken from seized ships. Eliza Broom held the document, proving her son had been innocent. "You sold my boat before he had a hearing," she said. Lucian's counsel objected. Lady Honoria overruled him. Eliza faced Alexander. "I came to the palace twice. I was told the matter had been reviewed. You were told by the man who stole it." Alexander did not offer an excuse. Yes, the single word held more responsibility than any defense could have. Caleb testified next. He described being ordered to guide selected ships to an isolated berth where no independent witnesses were present. Customs officers removed legal manifests and replaced them with incomplete copies. Captains who protested were accused of concealment. Caleb had refused to continue after seeing relief cargo carried underground. He was arrested the same evening. "Why did you escape?" Lady Honoria asked. "Because Sir Lucian's men brought an unsigned confession and told me the next document would be my burial record." "Why go to the Duchess?" "Because St. Anne's kept copies." Rosamund looked towards Alexander. That simple practice, keeping a second record beyond customs control, had made the Refuge dangerous to Lucian. Alexander had mistaken that danger for rivalry. Lucian was allowed to answer the charges. He stood without apology. "You demanded results," he told Alexander. "You wanted smuggling ended, investors reassured, and the coast made respectable. I did not order theft. You ordered success. I ordered lawful enforcement. You ordered statistics clean enough to print." The room became silent. Lucian continued. "The coast was never going to obey because you made speeches about justice. Fear created order. You created criminals. I selected men no one important would defend." His gaze moved towards Rosamund. "Until she did." Alexander's expression hardened. "You planted stolen cargo inside her refuge. I gave you the evidence required to close a competing authority. St. Anne's is not a government. It became one whenever your wife offered protection from your law." Rosamund stepped forward. "I offered protection from you." Lucian smiled faintly. "Precisely." Alexander ordered Lucian arrested for theft, fraud, unlawful imprisonment, conspiracy, falsification of evidence, and murder pending investigation into the missing sailors. But the removal of Lucian did not restore Alexander's authority without cost. Lady Honoria questioned him directly. "Did the Duchess warn you that records were being altered?" "Yes." "Did she request independent inspection?" "Yes." "Did you grant it?" "No." "Did you know she had hidden fugitives?" "Yes." "Did that fact influence your judgment of all evidence she presented?" "Yes." "Did Sir Lucian force you to suspend the Refuge's legal privileges?" "No." "Did he force you to accuse your wife publicly?" "No." Alexander looked towards Rosamund. "He falsified evidence. I decided her disobedience made her unworthy of being heard. The Thornmere Coastal Authority was dissolved. Every customs conviction from Lucian's term was reopened. Prisoners held without trial were released. Ships sold before lawful judgment were traced and repurchased where possible. Families received compensation for stolen cargo, lost wages, and wrongful imprisonment. Alexander sold his private yacht and a London residence to fund the first payments. The emergency harbour charter was withdrawn before it could become law. A new maritime court was established with independent judges, public evidence registers, legal access for detainees, separate control of prisons and warehouses, 2 witnesses for every seizure, prohibition against auction before judgment, copies of manifests stored outside customs. St. Anne's received permanent legal access to prisoners and their families. It did not remain under ducal control. Its governing board included sailors, widows, barristers, dock workers, and Rosamund. Alexander was not given a seat. He found her in the Refuge chapel after the first prisoners were released. The hidden room stood open. 3 narrow beds remained against the wall. "You were right to protect them," he said. Rosamund looked at him. "I was wrong to make the decision alone." The admission surprised him. "I expected you to say the end justified it. It preserved their lives. It also deepened the breach between us. You believed I would tell Lucian. I believed you trusted him more than you trusted me." "I did. That is not the same as wanting you deceived." Alexander stepped closer. "I thought you had built a court where your mercy overruled law. I built a place where the law could be challenged before it destroyed the evidence. I see that now, because the vault was opened." "Yes." Rosamund's face tightened. "What happens when there is no vault? No stolen chest? No royal inspector watching?" "I listen before I punish. You investigate before demanding obedience." "Yes. You allow the possibility that an order carrying your authority may still be unjust." He hesitated only a moment. "Yes." Rosamund looked towards the chapel door. "Then begin there." Alexander apologized publicly in the harbour square. He did not speak from the customs balcony. He stood at ground level before the families whose ships had been taken. "I believed a law bearing my authority could not be used against the innocent." He looked towards St. Anne's. "The authority did not make it just. It merely made the injustice harder to challenge." He admitted that Rosamund had broken his order. Then he explained why that did not excuse his refusal to examine her evidence. "I treated disobedience as proof of dishonesty. I confused control with justice and obedience with loyalty." He restored Eliza Broom's vessel. He read the names of those imprisoned without lawful trial. He also read the names of men still missing. The harbour remained silent. Alexander understood that silence was not rejection. It was the space accountability required. Rosamund did not immediately return to their shared rooms. She moved her legal work permanently to St. Anne's. When Alexander asked whether she trusted the new board more than him, she answered, "I trust a system where no single person, including me, can make evidence disappear." He accepted the answer. During the following year, he attended maritime hearings only as an observer. When a customs officer requested immediate seizure without 2 witnesses, Alexander refused. When merchants complained that independent review slowed trade, he replied, "Speed is not proof of justice." When a man was acquitted after customs had publicly accused him, Alexander did not describe the result as a failure. "The system protected an innocent man," he said. "That is what it exists to do." Rosamund heard the words from others. He did not repeat them to her as proof of reform. That mattered. Lucian was convicted on the financial charges. Evidence from the underground cells later connected him to the deaths of 2 captains and a harbour clerk. He claimed Thornmere had become prosperous because he had been willing to do what Alexander would not. Alexander did not attend the sentencing. He was meeting the families of sailors whose records had been falsified. Some accepted compensation. Others told him no payment could restore years taken from them. He listened without defending the title that had made the injustice possible. 2 years later, the rebuilt customs court opened beside the harbor. The underground vault had been emptied and converted into a public archive. Every seized item was recorded there. Every owner could request inspection of the evidence. The first case concerned a small vessel accused of carrying undeclared tobacco. The captain denied the charge. Customs produced 2 crates. The defense produced the original manifest and a dock worker who had witnessed the loading. The independent court ruled that the tobacco had been placed aboard after seizure. The captain was released. The responsible officer was arrested. Alexander watched from the rear of the chamber. Once, he would have feared that such a ruling made Thornmere appear weak. Now he said, "Then the system has protected an innocent man. That is not failure." After the hearing, he found Rosamund outside St. Anne's. The evening tide moved through the harbor. Caleb was guiding a relief ship towards the quay. Eliza Broom's restored fishing boat passed beyond the breakwater. Alexander stopped several feet from his wife. "May I walk with you?" Rosamund studied him. "You may walk beside me. You may not call it loyalty if I must follow where you lead. Then choose the road." She looked towards the waterfront path. After a moment, she began walking. Alexander fell into step beside her. He did not reach for her hand immediately. He had learned that closeness requested was different from closeness assumed. Halfway to the harbor wall, Rosamund's hand brushed his. This time, she did not move it away. Thornmere had not been saved when every sailor learned to fear the Duke's law. It was saved when Alexander understood that power could wear the language of order while committing theft beneath the courthouse. A law that allowed no challenge was not strong. It was merely protected from the truth. And a marriage that called obedience loyalty was no safer. Rosamund had broken his command. Alexander had broken the trust that should have made secrecy unnecessary. Their future began only when both could admit those truths without demanding that one erase the other.